Welcome to the Object-Oriented Concepts Session 2. In this session, we are going to discuss the two concepts, the nested class and the namespaces. So when you're going to talk about nested class, it is almost similar to the nested if statement what you have came across until now, and it is almost similar to again nested structure also, right? So you are already aware of how we are going to create nested structure or a nested for loop, nested while loop, nested switch statement, or a nested if statement. Hence it is almost similar to that. Hence right now when I say it is nested classes, we usually talk about classes and how we are going to create the nested concepts out of this. And so now we are going to have two classes here. We are going to have class ABC, and we are going to have one data member for this and two member functions. So nothing new in this. So as we have seen until now, it's the same class what we are defining or declaring. And we are going to have one more class XYZ. And right now you can see the two simple classes which is exactly on your screen. So now when I say nested class or nested classes, we are going to bring one of the class as a declaration or definition inside the another class, something like this. Now I'm going to bring the class XYZ inside the class ABC. So when I put this as a definition of a class inside another class, now this is what we talk about a nested class. So this is where exactly we are going to have a nested class where one class definition I'm going to put inside another class definition. So now you can just look at this. Look at these two difference. What difference you can note it down here? Yes. In the first snapshot or the snippet what I have been put over here. So in this case, the class XYZ is in the public section. In the class, it is as a public section. Whereas in the second snapshot, we are going to have the class XYZ as a private section. So now when you are putting or defining a class inside another class, it doesn't matter where you're defining this. I can put it in a private section as a private definition, or I can put it as a public section as a public definition. So now once we are going to have a nested class, something like right now I add class ABC initially and the class XYZ was not part of this. But now as we have modified the code and we have brought the class XYZ inside the class ABC, hence we are going to have class ABC inside this. Now there is a class XYZ. So for this case, this is where we talk about this as a nested class of class ABC and class XYZ. Once I have done this, so we are going to call something called as inner class now. Until this point of time, nowhere we had used something called as inner class or something called as outer class also. Now just observe here. So ABC now is an outer class and XYZ becomes an inner class because XYZ has been defined inside the class ABC. Hence for this reason we are going to call XYZ as inner class and ABC as outer class. In the other terms, I can call inner class as nested class also, which technically speaking we need to call this as nested class rather than call this as inner class, which is a non-technical term. So technically we are going to term this as nested class, and the outer class technically we are going to term this as enclosing class. And so once we are going to have a nested class, we'll be having the nested class which is going to be in form of inner class and the enclosing class as an outer class, so which is going to surround the class XYZ or the inner class. Right. So now whenever we are going to have a nested class and when you're going to have an inner class, so it is need not that we are going to have only one class as an inner class. If I want, I can define any number of class definition either in private section or in a public section inside another class in any number. That is what pictorially I am representing here, as I am going to have class ABC as an enclosing class. Now class XYZ is a nested class, as well as class EXP is also a nested class. And whatever we are going to discuss, it is going to apply something like the class EXP can also be the inner class of class XYZ. I can take up the nested or the nesting level at the level 3. Right now it's at level 2. If I want, I can take it to the level 3 also. Fine. And this is what we are going to say. The nested class can contain, or the enclosing class can contain, n number of nested classes. Fine. Now just look at an example. We are going to have class ABC, which has got one member called int A, which is going to be a private data member, and we are going to have public members. Now int B is a public member, and I'm going to now define a new class as a nested class here called as class XYZ. And this class XYZ, in this class XYZ has got one data member, and it's going to have few member functions. Something like we are going to have void set1, and we are going to have A equals 5. Now just observe here, A is the private data member of enclosing class, and I'm going to have B equals 10. Again, B is the public data member of enclosing class, and C is the private data member of the nested class and XYZ. And we are going to have one more function, void set2, which is the member function of ABC. Now void set2 is not the member function of XYZ, because we have completed the definition or declaration of the class after void set or over here. Fine. Hence we are going to have void set2 is the member function of ABC, and set1 is the member function of XYZ. And observe again, in void set2 function, I'm going to have A equals 1, and I'm going to have B equals 2, and C equals 3. Observe here. So A and B are the members of ABC, and C is the member of class XYZ or nested class. Now out of these statements, what exactly I want you to note it down here is whether this is allowed. Can I access the member of enclosing class inside the member of nested class, or can I access the member of nested class as the member of enclosing class? Now just look at this. When I do this, when I compile this program, I'm going to end with few errors. That means it is not going to usually allow you to access members like this. Now when I compile this, very first error which I am going to get here is, so we are going to have an invalid use of non-static data member, that is ABC, under the scope of A. That means a variable A is under the scope of the class ABC. This is the error. And so what does this going to point is that you're not supposed to access the data member of enclosing class inside the member of, or the member function of a nested class. You're not supposed to access. And one more point, note it down. The error is only for non-static data member. If int A was a static data member, then it would have been allowed to access even inside the nested class. Now this is not a static data member, and it is a non-static data member, hence it is not going to allow you to do. Hence you cannot access a private data member, so A, inside the member of a nested class. Similarly for even B, even though B is a public data member, even this is not allowed. You are not supposed to access the data member, either it's public or private, of the enclosing class inside an nested class. And now there is no any problem with C equals 15 because it's its own data member it can access. And if I talk about set 2, there is no problem with A and B because they are their own data members, but there's a problem with C equals 3. Now C is the data member of nested class. Hence, now your compiler will not even allow the enclosing class member function to access the member of the nested class. So this means though we are making a nested class here and an enclosing class here, still all those properties what we are discussed with the class, that is a data member or any member of a class can be accessed only by its own member. So this is going to be still be active. Even though it's nested class, you're not supposed to access one member by another member using any of the definitions. Right? Hence we have just corrected or debugged this code. Hence we have removed all those variables whichever is going to cause me error. Hence I'm going to have just one data member for ABC and one data member for XYZ as B, and I'm going to have B equals 10, A equals its respective member functions or accessing its respective data members. Now this should not cause me any problem. Right. So now just few points what we can just put it over here with respect to the program what we have discussed. So nested class cannot access non-static members of enclosing class. So this means the static members still can be accessed, but non-static members cannot be accessed. Right? And so enclosing class cannot access any member of a nested class. So I think I made a mistake here, so this is supposed to be off, not or. Hence, so enclosing class cannot access any member of nested class. So in nested class, it has an privilege where it can access non-static, but even it's not the case in the enclosing class. Enclosing class even cannot access the static data member of a nested class. So nested class is just a definition of a class. That means when I'm going to put class XYZ or define something like this, now this is just a definition. It is not, right now it's not the member of the class ABC. It is just a definition of class XYZ. So remember, so right now class ABC has got only two members. One is the data member int A and other is the member function set2. So any other members the ABC doesn't have. Class XYZ is just a definition, not a member. So definition of a nested class. If I am defining any nested class, so inside another class, so now this definition of nested class can be defined in the private section or in public section. And remember, as the class XYZ is just a definition, not a member, hence it is not going to have any data size or any memory size. Hence, the size of enclosing class is not affected with the definition of the nested class or nested classes. Fine. So now I'm just going to have one more example similar to this, and the difference what you can look out to this code here is, as I told you, in this program there was only class definition, hence it was not a member of the class ABC, and the size of this enclosing was never a matter to this class ABC. But now observe, I am creating an object to the class XYZ, that is NOBJ. I am creating an object over here. Now whatever the object I am creating, now this object becomes the member of the class ABC. So listen carefully. Now this NOBG is the member of the class ABC. Earlier to this, the program had got only two members, int A and void set2 with the class ABC. But now the class ABC contains three members, int A, and the second member is XYZ NOBJ. And we are going to have one more function as usual, set2. And right now the class ABC contains 3 members along with the nested class definition. So now I am creating an additional member. Now for sure the memory size is going to be mattered or is going to be altered. Fine. So now this other part of the codes where we are going to have a variation here. The variation here is, now just observe the definition of the class and the object creation NOBJ was in public section. Now the same thing I have been made it to be in the private section. Now the class XYZ, the definition and NOBJ is going to be in the private section. Now the difference here is in the first program, this program, whatever the NOBJ have been declared or created, now this is going to be a public data member. NOBJ is a public data member, and in this case NOBJ is a private data member. So now we are going to have class ABC. Now I am creating a definition of a class XYZ inside the class ABC as usual, but I am declaring the object of this class XYZ as NOBJ1 in the private section and NOBJ2 in the public section. I am creating 2 objects. Now once I have defined the class, now I can create n number of objects. So right now the class ABC contains 4 members. The int A is the first member, XYZ NOBJ1 is the second member, and XYZ NOBJ2 is the third member, and void set2 is the fourth member. And the int A and NOBJ1 are private and remaining 2 are public. Hence by this, if you just look at this, the definition of the class, either I put in public section or I put in private section, this is not going to have any effect. Hence we say the place of definition of nested class is irrelevant right now. But the place where you define the object, something like NOBJ1 or NOBJ2, this is going to matter. This is going to matter a lot. Hence the place of declaration of nested object is going to matter, because one definition or declaration is making it as an private and other is going to make it as a public. Okay, so now just look at this. So class ABC, the same program what I have been just discussed. So if you observe, I am just trying to access the data members, so using OBJ1 and NOBJ2. Now this NOBJ1 is going to access the data member of XYZ. So through NOBJ1 I am trying to access B. Now this should be a legal operation at the outside, and I am accessing the data, sorry, the member function of XYZ using NOBJ1. Similarly using NOBJ2 and NOBJ2. Now this at the outside, it should look like it's going to work, but it has got few errors and few restrictions. Just check out. So A equals 1. Now this should not be any problem because I'm accessing its own member. But when I say NOBJ1.b, now this is going to have a problem. The problem is int ABC, scope of XYZ, B is a private data member, hence you are not supposed to access B, which is a private data member of XYZ, from the member of ABC. You're not supposed to access. That's the problem what you are going to get. And in this statement, when I say B, so we're going to have error. So again, I'm trying to access the private data member B, even the same problem with this. But if you just look at these 2 statements, there is no any problem, because the set this member function is going to be a public, and I can access this and even I can access this. Hence, so inside the member function of an enclosing class, it can access the public members of the nested class through its object reference, and this is what this program is going to tell you. And now just look at this. I just told you that the place of definition of nested class is irrelevant. Is it so? Now I'm just going to show you. Sometimes it is going to be relevant. Just look at this program now. I'm going to have class ABC where I'm defining the class XYZ in the public section. And now I'm going to have a main function. So in the main function, I'm just going to have creating an object for ABC outer class as EOBJ, and I'm going to have XYZ NOBJ1 creating the object for XYZ, and EOBJ.XYZ I'm just trying to access NOBJ1, NOBJ2 along with the XYZ object. I'm creating one more object NOBJ2, and I'm going to create one more object NOBJ3. Just observe in this case what exactly, which statement is going to be right or which statement is going to be wrong. When I say ABC EOBJ, it should not pose me any error because it is as usual what I was doing. But look at the statements XYZ NOBJ1. Now this is going to pose an error. The error says XYZ was not declared in this scope because its scope relies inside ABC only. Hence you cannot create the object for XYZ outside the class. It should be inside the enclosing class only, something like XYZ NOBJ1 and XYZ NOBJ2. And now just go to the next statement. I'm using the object of the enclosing class dot, I'm using the name of the nested class, and I'm trying to create the object. Now this should solve me the problem, but not it. Even this is going to be an invalid use of the class ABC XYZ. You're not supposed to even do this. You cannot create the object something like this. And the next table using scope session operator, even this is not possible. Now even this is going to give me an error. So with respect to the namespace. So now next we are going to have ABC scope session operator XYZ NOBJ3. Now this should solve me the problem because being in the scope of ABC, I am creating the object for XYZ. Now this is going to work fine for me. And so right now I have created NOBJ3 object for XYZ, but can it access the members? We'll see it later. But right now it's going to work fine. Now just look at this program now. The modification what I have done over here is I have just took the class declaration in the place of public section, right? And in this case now the same program, if I execute again, I'll be suffering from these 3 errors, and this was a proper statement, but I made it to be public. Now this is not going to make, sorry, I made it to be private, and for this reason I'm going to get the error as, so class ABC XYZ is a private, hence you cannot even create an object for the nested class outside the class in the main function or any non-member function. Hence now just think whether the place of definition of nested class is going to be irrelevant or relevant. Right now in this example it's going to be relevant because, so if I am putting the class definition in the public section with the scope of enclosing class, I can create the object outside the class. But if I am putting the same class definition inside the class ABC and in the private section, this is not going to allow me to do. So now we can say the place of definition of nested class will be relevant, at least in this case. Fine. So now just one more example. Just look at this. We are going to have class ABC and the same of program and the same 2 objects, and in the main function, so as right now I have put the class XYZ inside the private section of ABC. I don't have any way creating the object of the class XYZ outside the class ABC. Hence, I'm not going to define any object for the class XYZ outside the class. But now we'll see. We'll create an object for ABC, something like EOBJ, and we will just going to find how exactly we are going to access the data members. So right now I've got three objects. Inside the class ABC, I got two objects, NOBJ1, NOBJ2, and one external object which has been defined in the main function for the enclosing class as EOBJ1. Now these are the set of statements. So using NOBJ1, I'm going to access the private data member. I'm using the object of the same class to access the private data member. Now this was supposed to happen, but it's not going to happen in the non-member functions. This should be an error statement, and there's no error in this statement, but this statement is going to be an error. Fine. And now we are just going to have just look at this. I'm going to have n set of statements. So now all the statements is going to pose error for me. Now I'm going to have n object1 dot p equals 10. Now this is not allowed. Error because NOBJ1 was not declared in this scope because it is inside the scope of ABC or enclosing class only. Hence you cannot use this object outside its class or outside the member function of the enclosing class. The same error will be suffered by even this statement. Whether it's a private member or a public member, I'm going to have same error. And even the same error with the NOBJ2. So though NOBJ2 is a public member, still I'm not supposed to do this. So because though NBJ2 is a public member, but still it is in the scope of enclosing class ABC. Hence you cannot do this. So now the same thing even in this case. Hence you're not supposed to access any members, or it can be public or private, using the inner class objects which has been defined inside the enclosing class. Hence now we'll just go on with this object then. So EOBJ dot NOBJ1. So from EOBJ I'm traversing to NOBJ1, and from NOBJ I'm going to access B. Now if this is going to be a problem because I'm using two levels of accessing or dot operator. So if this was supposed to be fine, but now this is going to be error because B is a private data member, and any private data member cannot be accessed inside and non-member functions. Again we're going to suffer with this error. Now just look at this. Now this was supposed to be right because set1 is a public member, but again your compiler is not going to allow me to do this because NOBJ1 is a private object or the private data member of class ABC. Now at the second level I'm going to get the error. At this point I may get the error at the second level or the level 3, but right now I'm going to get the error at the level 2 itself. Hence again this is going to be error. Now just observe this. NOBJ2, it's a public data member I can access, but B is a private data member I'm not supposed to access, and this is the error what I'm going to get. Now this statement looks appropriate and proper. I'm using EOBJ of enclosing class and object dot NOBJ2, which is a public data member, dot set1, which is a public member function. Now this is going to be a proper statement that is going to work for us. Fine. So now this is going to be all about the nested class, where we're going to have an enclosing class or outer class, and we're going to have an inner class called as nested class. We can have n number of nested class, and just understand what object, where we are going to define, and what type of member is going to access from the class of enclosing or from the class of nested class. Now this is going to be all about your nested classes. So now whatever nested class we have discussed is with respect to C++ program. But if I discuss the same nested classes with the Java programming, It's going to be almost same, but there's slight enhancement which the Java is going to give to you. I will just tell what is the slight modification or slight enhancement with this nested class is going to be when I introduce you to the Java program. So now we'll see what is namespaces. Right, so namespaces. So now just look at this. So let me break down this word into two parts, the name and the space. Right, so when I say a name in any programming language, whenever I want to give a name for a variable, name for a function, name for a structure, name for a class, name for an object, whatever the part it's going to be, whenever I'm going to say it as a name, we are going to call this as identifier. Identifier is the technical name, what we can call it for any name what I'm going to give. Hence, in a C++ program, so what are all the places where we are going to use identifier? Hence, the first place is the class name what I'm going to give, and the second place is the data member name what I'm going to give, and the next place is the member function name what I'm going to give, and the next place is the object name. Hence, so these are the four places where we are going to have the objects, or where we are going to have the name as an identifier. When I talk about space, now just observe here, so this data member name and member function name will be always inside the scope of a class. It's going to be always inside scope of a class, and so these two are not exposed so easily to the outside world. Hence, we can say the space of these two are always private or always with respect to a class, and so this should never give me any issue with the name what I use or the name what I choose. Hence, but class name and the object name are more exposed to the outer world for interaction of the class with the program. These are the two which will be expose itself to the outer space also. Hence, when I say namespaces, it is just about the class name and the object name which is going to be exposed itself. Hence, we will just see what exactly I'm talking about exposing itself to the outside of the class or outside world or outside its space. Hence, so right now we'll just focus only on the class name. Hence, we are just going to discuss only upon the class name and the object name. So now just observe here. Now this is my entire program, so which we call as program space. We're going to have entire program space. My program, hence I've given the program space 1. Now in this program, I've got list of class names and objects. So now exactly let us not differentiate which one is the class and which one is the object. Now I'm going to have list of class name and the object. Just assume these are the classes which have been inherited or have been included from an header file. So once I am going to do this, once I'm going to have test, student and exam, I'm going to have three classes here, and I'm going to define my own class here. When I'm defining own class, now just observe, I'm going to have same class name. Now you're not supposed to do this. If I'm going to have the same class name in one single program space, now this is going to be a problem. So which should not be the case. We are not supposed to have the same name for the class. The same thing, we cannot have the same object name also. Hence the same conflict with the ID and ID and type. And so now you need to change the name of this class, or you need to change name of this class. You're not supposed to change this because I've just told you that this is the header file class what have been included. Hence you don't have any authority to modify this. You need to modify. Now your intention was you needed a class called as test, but now you're not supposed to do this. You cannot have a test class. And for this case, to manage such conflicts, something like when I'm going to include any library file which will create a global space, If I don't include any library files or any other code inside my program, this is just going to be a local space for me. So there are not going to be any name conflict, because whatever the name we are going to create, it is just going to be part of my program. Hence, it would have been never created a global space. It would have been always a local space for me. Hence, but now we are going to have a library file included. Now this is going to create me the global space. Now when I create a global space, so this global space can have naming conflicts, something like what I have been told. I add my own classes in this program. Due to the inclusion of an header file inside my program, now there is a name conflict between these two class names. That is what I'm going to mean. So now I somehow either I should not include the header files, but I need to make use of header files. So I need to include this header file, so that I'm going to work on some inbuilt function. So I don't have any other way now. I need to include. I'm going to include. The naming conflict is going to arise. Now I need to avoid this, or I need to resolve this. Hence, for this case, we need to isolate our own namespaces or our own naming identifiers from the rest of the world. Hence, so right now this is entire program is became a global namespace. Now I want to create my own local namespace. I need to have my own space. That is what we talk about namespaces. I am going to have this as a global space itself, because I cannot modify anything over here. But now I should be able to create a local namespace over here. Hence, so this is what exactly I was terming about. We are going to have its own space for the global declarations, and own space for my own declaration, and own space for some other global declarations. I'm going to create its own spaces. I'm going to give its own spaces. Once I create own spaces, now this is a different space and this is a different space. Now I'm using same class name but in different spaces. Now this is not going to create any conflict for me. This is where I'm going to avoid the naming conflict by creating different naming spaces. Now just look at this syntax, what I should use whenever I want to bring in the concept of naming spaces. Now we are going to have the keyword using space, namespace, space, and I'm going to give a tag, or I'm going to give a name for the namespaces. This is the syntax with an semicolon. Now look at this program now. I'm going to have two inclusion of the header file, iostream and cmath. Now I'm going to have class root, which I am declaring it as my class. I am declaring an object called as file. Now what if iostream or the cmath add its own class declaration similar to the class name root, or it would have been an object called as file. If any of this header file, it would have been declared a class called as root or object called as pi, then this would have been this was supposed to be an naming conflict. Fine. And so now we call this as global space because even my class has been exposed or included with the program. Okay. Okay, now just look at this. So now this is going to be a global space. So now which is going to expose my class and my objects along with the included class and the name. So now the same program, now I am going to bring in the concept of namespace. So using namespace and the namespace tag I am going to give it as demo. So now with this inclusion, now this becomes a global space and this becomes a local space for me. and this is the global space, this is the local space. So now whatever the name, whether this is going to have its own name, class name, or the object name, so it doesn't matter now, because this is a local space. Now these are two different spaces. I can have any class name of my choice here without thinking of whether the global space has got a class name with the name what I'm choosing right now, or the object name. This is the usage of namespace. Now just look at one more example. I am creating two local spaces here. One is demo and demo2. When I am going to use these two local namespaces, I'm going to have a class root. Now this is root is going to belong to demo2 class, because this is the latest one which I have been defined. Now if I want the same class name two times, I'm going to put it in different namespaces. Now this root class becomes the part of demo namespace, and this root class becomes the part of demo2 namespace. And so I've got two local namespaces. By using this, we are going to create the same class name n number of times. This is what going to be all about the namespaces. So now we have came across with the nested class, and we came across namespaces, how we are going to divide namespaces. So this is what we are supposed to discuss in this session. Thank you.